Welcome to another in our series of Kehillat Israel podcasts. This is a recording of Rabbi Amy Bernstein's weekly Friday morning Torah study.
So we are beginning the part of Genesis, which is the longest text in Genesis, continuous text. It's a novella. It is the novella of Yosef, of the story of Yosef, of Joseph. And so we are not going to be meeting next week. The building's closed for stuff. They're going to do massive stuff in the building. And so we're not meeting next week. So we're not going to read that chunk. But the rest of the book of Genesis is the story of Yosef. So it's a little different than how we normally study, because usually we're doing chunks of text that kind of stand alone-ish, right? They're connected to the larger narrative, but this one is really a novella. So today we're doing, a tiny part of a quarter of the novella. So it's a little harder to make a Torah study that feels like, oh, great, that was an amazing little vignette. But we're gonna dig in anyway, like we do. Most of you are familiar with the Joseph story, right? Everybody's pretty familiar with the Joseph story and what happens. Okay. So at the end, rather than doing a source sheet this week, I'm going to have us walk through a piece by Dr. Mijal Bitton, one of my amazing instructors in Hartman. But she's stationed in the States. She is a sociologist, and she is an expert in Sephardic Jews and Sephardic Judaism. She herself identifies as a brown person, and she's Sephardic. So that's her field of study, is Sephardic Judaism. But she also does studies around social issues, and she's a sociologist. So social issues and Judaism, that's her intersection, and is very interested in the issues about anti-Semitic rhetoric that makes us both not white by the right? Where Jews will not replace us. Who's the us? White people, right? So we're not white according to the right. And she was one of the first to really dig into and identify the fact that on the left, we are identified as white and part of the colonialist power wealth system, and therefore cannot be vulnerable and cannot be oppressed. So between being not white, so we're not really American and not really entitled to a lot of things because we're not white, and we're part of the oppressive power structure, we cannot be vulnerable. So we are trapped between two understandings of who we are, both of which mean we are not real Americans and have no right to, claim any vulnerability or alliance with other vulnerable groups and other vulnerable populations. We can't make allegiances and alliances because we're part of the problem. We're part of the white power structure. So she gave an incredible lecture she was on a panel with another man, a young man who was from a working class family, no college or university in his family. And they were having this conversation. And she said, I was more connected to wealth and power and education and all of those things than the young man I was sitting at the table with. It's absolutely true. Right? He's not Jewish. And she said, and I am a brown person, right? Who also deals with the discrimination of being a brown person plus being a brown Jew, and so she said it was it was an interesting experience for her because he's not wrong. It's not totally wrong. Jews do have access to a lot of influential levers that we pull, and wealth and education, and we pass as white. And so it's just a very interesting time to be having this conversation. So we're going to look at a piece by her related to the Joseph story, coming out of all the stuff we've come out of. Okay, so we've come out of Abraham. We came through Abraham to, so Abraham and Sarah, to Isaac and Rebecca, right? And we've left the Isaac and Rebecca narratives, and we were in the Jacob narratives, Jacob and his 2 wives and 2 concubines and 13 children. Okay. So we're now dealing with the generation of the 13 children. So we're coming out of Yaakov's story and into the story of his sons. Okay. So let's just remember the epigenetic trauma that has happened in this family, right? Starting with Abraham and Yitzchak. So Abraham and Yitzchak, we read this year about the trauma of, what that must have been like for Yitzchak to know that his father was ready to kill him. And then Yitzchak and the tension between Esav and Yaakov, and the fact that Rebekah and Isaac each side with one child. And Rebekah encourages Jacob to trick Esav out of the birthright and out of the blessing of the firstborn. Okay, so that is where we're at now. Jacob has made his way back home and is wealthy and successful. Okay, so that's where we're going to begin. So we're in Parshat Vayeshev, Genesis chapter 37. And for those of you who care about such things, we are now in the Everett Fox translation on the screen. We're just going to keep playing with the Safaria toy. And then, of course, you have a different translation in front of you. And Bert has, as always, the red translation in front of him, the Eitz Chaim. So always speak up when you have a different translation that you feel is a translation, like a move by the translator that's important to make a point. Exactly. That the translator is translating it that way. And it makes a difference. All right. I know you're not going to believe me, but there is reams of midrash written on 37:1 that we're not going to do. I will hint at it for you, but reams of midrash written on this first verse. Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz migurei aviv be'eretz Canaan. And Yaakov settled in the land of his father's settlings in the land of Canaan. Okay. Juicy stuff. You can understand why the rabbis dug in here, right? It's just an engraved invitation to Midrash, right? Yeah. All right. So most of the Midrashim address the fact that Vayeshev, to dwell, tends to suggest happily, peacefully, right? That, it's not like camping overnight. Like it implies you're comfortable. You're yesheving.
They really live there.
Sojourning. Yeah, you live there. It's your place. Everything's groovy. And the rabbis say that is Yaakov's mistake. That he thinks he can just have a comfortable life and kind of his work is done. And that this is a grave error on Yaakov's part. We're Jews. What, you think you should sit and you should have it easy and you're just going to have your coffee and drink your tea right? So no. And so this is the beginning of the problem, is that he thinks he's going to dwell in peace. And of course, now we get evidence. The rest of the story for the rabbis is evidence to the contrary, that he set up the wrong goal. And now we're going to see the consequences. All right. Vayeshev, so he's hanging out in Eretz Canaan. Eile Toldot Yaakov. These are the generations of Yaakov. So now we get Eile Toldot when we're going to get the story of, the descendants. Here's what happens with our guy. Here's what happens with our patriarch. Yaakov's the patriarch. Yosef ben Sheva Esrei Shana. So Yosef is 17 years old and he's a shepherd, along with his brothers. And he's a Na'ar. Right? He's a young guy, right? Who na'ar et bnei Bilha. So he was a young lad doing the same kind of stuff that the children, the sons of Bilha and Zilpah were doing. Neshei Aviv, the concubines of his father. Vayave Yosef et dibatam ra'ah el avihem. And Yosef took reports, ra'ah. What's ra'ah?
Bad stuff.
Bad stuff. He took bad reports about them to their father.
He was a tattletale.
He was a tattletale.
Na'ar.
Huh?
An ark.
Oh my gosh. Wow. An ark.
He was unarmed. Oh.
Really, Nick?
Thank you.
Really?
Thank you.
Beautiful.
I'll be here.
Well done. You'll be here all week, right? He's an ark. Okay. Love that. V'Yisrael ahav et Yosef mikol banav.
The letters are the same for shepherd. Is that just, aren't they the same word? I mean, it's pronounced differently, but it's the same.
Yes.
Exact letter.
Yes. Yes. So I think, Betsy, that there's a midrash there to be written.
Verse.
Right?
By the way,
Okay.
my translation says he was a helper to the sons.
Interesting. The word in Hebrew is na'ar, which means youth, male. That's all it says. But the et b'nei bilha is interesting. Et, indirect object. So with the sons of, to the sons of Bilha and Zilpah? Don't know. Because all we get is na'ar. All we get is young lad. Right? Okay. My translation says he was a serving lad.
Same thing.
Yeah. So, okay.
Subordinate.
Subordinate. Correct. A subordinate who is a na'ar. That's going to stick. All right. So, because that's important to the story that he narks on his half brothers. All right. For starters. Right. Just for starters. By Yisrael ahav et Yosef mikol banav. And Yisrael, who's Yisrael? Yaakov. Good. Loves Yosef. He loved Yosef more than all of his sons, because the son of his elderhood was he, right? V'asalo ktonet pasim, and he made for him an ornamental tunic. All right. So in the ancient Near East, do you remember when we had the picture of the folks with the tassels? Remember when we looked at the archaeological thing and it had the tassels on the bottom of the robe? That outer robe is what they're talking about. The kutonet. So it is you wore linen breeches and linen, or, you wore a kaftan. You still see this traditional Arab dress is the kaftan, right? So that's what the tassels were on the bottom of, on the hem. That is what Yaakov has made for Yosef, a very fancy one of these. Now, Yaakov had a rival. His rival was Esav. Why was it such a hot rivalry? Why was it so bad?
Well, it was
He stole his birthright. Whose idea was that? His mother's. So Yaakov and Esav were enemies, right? To the point that Esav was ready to kill him because Rebekah favored Yaakov, and we know I can't keep all these names straight, people. And Isaac favored Esav, the hunter. Okay? So the parents weighing in on favoritism with their children caused their children to be enemies.
Does that happen?
So you'd think Yisrael would know a little bit about what not to do when you're parenting siblings, if you want them to get along. He loves Yosef more than all the other sons. Okay, you could keep that private. I know it's really hard to do that. Everybody knows who the favorite child is in every family, and it's hard to keep quiet, but you don't say it. Nobody talks about it. Unless you buy a really amazing, specially crafted kutonet pasim for them.
Make sure everybody knows.
So everybody knows who the favorite son is, because that's a good idea. To keep shalom bayit, to keep peace in the home. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Was Benjamin younger than Joseph?
Yes.
So Joseph wasn't the only child of his age.
He was not, but he's the eldest of Rachel.
Oh, he's the eldest of Rachel.
He's the eldest son of Rachel, the firstborn of Rachel and Yaakov. His love, Rachel. Right? Okay.
And it doesn't mention that the daughter was a favorite. She like doesn't
Certainly
exist.
not.
She's like nowhere to be found.
Certainly not.
In a paragraph.
Right. And all we know about her is that she is raped.
That's right.
That's what we know about Dina.
Yeah.
Okay. But you gotta, come on. Now, she went out to be with the other girls. So, she went out. What do you expect?
If the lesson from this is what not to do, then how do the rabbis deal with the counterfactual? Well, if it hadn't happened this way, then the line would have gone to the song.
So the rabbis do not say this is a story about what Yisrael should not have done. I said that.
Okay. So
that is not the rabbis. Okay. The rabbis are very clear. This is God's design.
This is the lesson for us, not the way it should have turned.
Trust God is the lesson for the rabbis.
Okay.
Right? God knows what God's doing. Okay. Mine is very interesting that Yaakov so overtly favors Yosef after coming out of a history where it almost cost him his life. Like Esau, that's why he left, is because Rivka hears Esau say, when dad is dead, I'm going for him.
Is there midrash about why Joseph?
No.
I mean, I don't know.
No, here. Mikol, he loves him because he's the son of his
not about
old
character
age.
Traits or anything like that.
No, it's because he's Rachel's son.
Just for genetics.
Well, he loves Rachel more than anything. This is her son. This is a piece of her. And she dies giving birth to Binyamin. So this is what's left of Rachel. So on the one hand, it's understandable that, let's say Joseph looks a lot like his mom. It's totally understandable that Yaakov loves him best. It's totally understandable. All I'm saying is, it's dumb. I don't care how much you love him more than the others. This is so stupid. Like, what this reads. Right? But I think Genesis is in large part about the lessons we don't learn. When we grow up in households and we're all damaged. So what do? We inflict a different kind of damage on our kids, right? Out of that, right? Whatever. So
this is not at all a defense. But I wonder if it, as someone who didn't have his father's favor, I wonder if it felt like that's what about that.
Interesting. Very interesting. That it was mom that favored him, not his father. And so he's now giving to Yosef what he didn't get.
He's a younger son.
Then
he gets to be sort of.
His mom never knew Benjamin.
Beautiful. No, she never
right.
knew Benjamin. No.
But the
all right.
favoritism, he favors Isaac over, Hagar's son.
Well, let's be clear though. Who favored Isaac over Ishmael? Sarah. That was Sarah's decision. So.
But he went along with it.
He did, but he was distressed, right? God says don't be distressed because he was upset. He didn't want to send Hagar and Ishmael away. But remember when we studied it from Savina Tuval's work, we studied it from women in Mesopotamia. If you adopt someone as your heir, if you adopt a son as your heir from a concubine, a slave, and you then disinherit that child in favor of a natural born child from your own body, then you must set that woman slave free and the boy. You can't keep them as slaves. So there is a way of reading that story that once Sarah took Yitzchak as her heir, officially, Ishmael is no longer her heir. Hagar and Ishmael must be freed. So it's not actually banishment. It's actually they can no longer stay as slaves. So, okay. One of the few things that make me at all better about that text, right, is looking at it from, but Ishmael's going to become his own father of his own people, right? Okay. So his brothers saw that their father, loved him more than all the brothers, Vayisnu oto, and they hated him. V'lo yachlu dabro l'shalom. They couldn't even speak, how are you? So when you say to somebody, Betsy, that you meet on the street in Israel, and you want to ask how they are in Hebrew, what do you say? Ma shlomcha? How's your shalom? That's how you say, how are you? Ma shlomech, ma shlomcha. How's your shalom? That's how are you, right? What this is saying is they couldn't even say l'shalom. They couldn't even do the just fakey, nicey, whatever you just say to somebody, hey, how are you? They couldn't even do that. Vayachlom Yosef chalom. And Yosef dreamt a dream. Now we just had a whole bunch of stories that we just looked at very closely about this nighttime visiony stuff, didn't we? Right. So for Yaakov, those visions are very important moments. We studied 2 of them. The angels going up and down the ladder, and last time we studied the Ish, right? He's wrestling with the Ish. Both of those are really important moments in Yaakov's life. I find it hard to believe, maybe they just didn't talk a lot, how we socialize men. Maybe they didn't talk, but I bet Yosef knows something about Yaakov and dreams. The dreams are not something to mess around with, right? That they are important. So Joseph dreams a dream. We have to believe this is not just, oh my God, you would not believe what I dreamt last night, right? Like, whoa, no more Garfield pepperoni pizza before bed. No more. We can assume this is not one of those. He wakes up and he knows this is more like a vision. And he goes and he tells his brothers. Vayosifu od sno oto, and they hate him even more. Now, what's his name? What's our guy's name? Yosef. What's this verb here? You see, this is the same exact letters. Vayosifu od sno, and more hatred got added. Lehosif, to add. So you can't miss that in the Hebrew. A beautiful literary play. Yosef. Now they Yosifu hate. Very beautiful play on words by the author. Okay. So they hate him even more. And he said to them, hey, y'all, listen to this dream that I had. Now, hine, right? Lo, we were binding sheaf bundles out in the field. And here my sheaf arose and it was standing upright. And here your sheaves were circling round and bowing down to my sheaf. His brother said to him, that was wise, right? Yeah. And his brother said, what? Hamaloch timloch aleinu? Like you're going to be the king roiling over us? Or what is the word? What does the king do? Reigns. You're going to be the king reigning over us? Would you really rule us? Vayosifu od sno. And more hatred got added.
I want to know this for y'all.
Atem. Second person plural. Atem. Y'all.
That's Texas.
That is Texas Hebrew. Exactly.
If it's one family, I would prefer.
Yeah, right? So our in-house psychiatric team is assessing this family as one that needs treatment. You're not wrong, which is why I love Genesis. I love that these are our ancestors. These are the stories we tell about our founders. What kind of a people shares these stories about their founders?
Real people. Right.
Real people. People that's a little mashugana. No? Okay. So they hate him. More hatred gets added because of his dreams and his words. It's bad enough you're dreaming this stuff. Yep. But you're going to share it? You're going to tell us about it? Vayachlom od chalom. And he dreamt another dream. And recounted it to his brothers. And said, here, I have dreamt yet another dream. Lo, Hashemesh v'hayareach, the moon and the sun and 11 stars were bowing down to me. Yeah, he needs help, Rick. He needs help. All right. So he needs to be on medication. So I never noticed before. I was reading a commentary that pointed out. So 11 stars were bowing down to him. Who's that?
The brothers.
The brothers.
His father.
Who's the sun and the moon? Ha ha ha.
Parents.
Justin, his parents. So if the stars are his siblings, sun and the moon is always feminine in rabbinic and most mythology. The moon is the feminine. And sun is always masculine. Think about Egypt. Think about, the ancient Near East. The sun is masculine. Moon is often feminine. So the sun and the moon, it's worse than I thought. And I was raised with this story, knowing how obnoxious this is. But now it's like not only his brothers, but his parents are bowing down to him. Okay. When he recounted it to his father and his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What kind of dream is that you've dreamt? Shall we come?" Yes. Oh, here it is. "I, your mother, and your brothers to bow down to you to the ground?" What happens at the end of our story? Harvey's like, well, to be fair, what happens at the end of the story is Yaakov bows before Yosef. Okay. His brothers envied him while his father shamar et hadavar, kind of kept watch, kind of noted, the business. So his brothers went to tend their father's sheep in Shechem. And Yisrael says to Yosef, "Have not your brothers, the shepherds, gone to Shechem? I'm going to send you to them, and you're going to go to them." So meaning Yosef has to go to Shechem. Vayomer lo hineni. And Yosef answers, what's the correct answer? When an authority is saying, I have a task for you, what is the right answer? Hineni. Here I am. I am ready. So Yosef has the right answer to his father. Hineni. Here I am. And he said to him, right? Look after the shalom of your brothers. Go see how your brothers are, right? And how the sheep are. And bring me back word. So he sent him out from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. All right. Yosef is going by himself. His brothers are off. Yaakov says, I want you to go check in on them and bring me a report. Yaakov is not a dumb guy. He is a very successful sheikh. What is going on?
I think he expected harm to those brothers.
Absolutely.
Nowhere in the story do we get an indication of that, but it is interesting. He's not stupid. And yet he's sending Yaakov by himself to go spy on his brothers and who hate him to bring back word about what's going on with them. Like, really?
That the whole thing about clans and everything is nobody goes anywhere by themselves in this world.
Excellent point, Richard, that if you can avoid it, you do not travel by yourself because it is just too dangerous.
But his father, he knows what so there's
What matter is he keeping in mind, Lisa?
that he knows that the brothers detest him, and he's not stopping. He's not saying, he's not interfering in any way with the process, and then he exacerbates.
But exactly after what does it say he kept the davar in mind? What's the davar?
That he and his wife
And the brother.
That's right. So it's right after Yosef reports to the brothers and to Yaakov the dream where everyone in the family bows to Yosef. That's what he's keeping in mind.
Because he believes it.
Right?
Could it be that he thinks that the brothers are in Shechem? Turns out they're not. They're going to be in Dothan. So it could be that maybe Shechem was close enough that, okay, there's a good chance Joseph will get in trouble, and this will be an opportunity for the brothers to come to his rescue and cash things out.
Okay, so Richard is on the side of, Yaakov is thinking maybe Yosef needs
a lesson.
He needs a lesson, but the brothers will,
Come through.
Okay.
It's kind of like he's returning to his old conflict avoidant ways, right?
Yaakov?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Like it says up top, like he's in the land, he's comfortable, thinks he's got a good life. Now he's not struggling anymore, so he doesn't have to face maybe more of these uncomfortable family mediations.
Beautiful. Because we just talked about this, didn't we? That's the whole thing of wrestling with the Ish, right? Was that he's been conflict avoidant. He runs away. That's what he does best, is run away. And in some ways, that's beautiful interpretation, Nick, that he's doing that here. He's running away from what's going on. And not only that, he sends everybody away, right? I need to pick up the pace here. Okay. Oh, God. Vayimtze'ehu. Ready, y'all? What does he find? What does he stumble across? What does he come upon? 15, verse 15. Vayimtze'ehu what? Ish.
An ish.
Ish. You cannot miss that from last week. You cannot miss that there's an Ish. Of course there's an Ish. There's always got, right? If anything's going to happen, if this is going to be a story where things pivot on their axis, there has to be an Ish. A person. Okay. So everyone who read and heard the story around the fire last night about the Ish knows, and Yosef, comes upon an Ish. Now we're all ready, right? Because you hear about last week in this right here. Okay. Vahine, and lo, he was roaming in the field. And so he asked, the Ish asks Yosef, Ma tivakesh. What are you looking for? What do you seek? And Yosef says, Et achai, my brothers I seek. Tell me, please, where are they doing their shepherding thing? And the Ish says to him, they've moved on from here. I heard them say, let us go to Dotan. So Yosef went after his brothers and came upon them in Dotan. So Peter Pitzela, in his bibliodrama, spends a lot of time having everybody think about a moment in their lives that was this moment that changed your destiny. That there was an Ish who in some way asked you, what are you seeking? And because of, the answer, your life took a turn. The one that was for me was when the third visiting rabbinical student in Atlanta said, why are you not in rabbinical school?
We had no answer.
One question, and I realized I no longer had an answer to that question. And that changed the course of my life. Each of us have an Ish moment, right? Somebody says something to you and it changes your destiny.
Or two or three.
Or two or three, right? That change that, or helps us live into our destiny, whatever. But, and the rabbis spent a lot of time on that. This is that moment for Yosef. So they see him coming from afar, and before he even got close, they're like, oh God, here he comes. Right? They started plotting. Lahamito, to kill him.
To be that clueless, though. Like he's saying all these things that are obviously going to make his brothers dislike him. I mean, he's such an egomaniac, and like, why would he just walk in? He has no clue that they're going to do something on him.
So one of the ways I get my head around that is having raised a teenage girl.
Mm-hmm.
There was times it was like a dog hearing a new sound going, do you really think speaking to me like that is going to get you somewhere you want to go? Like, what part of your brain does not understand? Wait, do you not hear yourself? Would you like to ask that question another way? Right. So I think part of it, he's young. And so his frontal lobes are not online.
Right.
And he's got adolescent broken brain where he does not understand how he's coming across. He is so self-absorbed. And remember, these stories are written about people who are much younger in the process of beginning adulthood. So when you're a na'ar in this world, you're 12, 13. So think of obnoxious, self-absorbed. They're not trying to be obnoxious. Mm-hmm. It's just how they're designed. So I think that's what it is. He's completely oblivious because he's just totally enamored with his amazing visions of his amazing, himself. Yeah. right. So they say, va'ata, and now, lechu, right? This harkens back to what? Lechu, let us go. What does this harken back to? Lech lecha. This goes back to go. Lech lecha, to Abraham and Sarah. Lechi, or elech, I'll go, says Rebecca, right? So it's about, here comes the next part of the big time plot, right? Let's go and kill him and throw him into one of those pits. And we'll say that an evil chaya, beast, ate him. And we'll see what happens with his dreams then. Mr. Busy with your dreams. Vayishma Reuven, but Reuven heard. Vayatzilehu miyadam, and saved him from their hands, and said, "We're not going to spill his blood. We're not going to take his life." And he says to them, Reuven says to them, "Do not shed blood. Instead, send him into the pit that's in the midbar, that's in the wilderness. But a hand do not send out against him." Right? Don't put a hand on him. What does this harken back to? Don't hurt him. Isaac. Don't do it. Don't hurt him. Okay? In order to save him from their hands, in order that he might return him to their father. So his plan, Reuben's plan clearly is throw him in the pit. Let's go about our business. And he's going to come back later and get him and return him safely to his father. And so when Yosef comes to his brothers, when he gets there, like they've made this plan, he gets there, they strip him of his special tunic that was on him, and they took him, Vayeshlichu, and they threw him into the pit, right? Rake, that was empty, meaning there's no water in it. Ein bo mayim. There's no water in it. Now, we did this one year. We're not going to do it now. Rake, empty. There's no water in it. Well, if there's no water in it, by definition, it is empty. So there's a whole midrashic tradition around that. The Torah never, right?
Isn't that related?
It doesn't. The Torah never. It's redundant. God forbid. So this must mean something else. So it's empty of water, but it's not empty of. You'll say it's brilliant. Hanaleh, brilliant. It's not empty, no, of snakes and scorpions. I don't know how you did not see that in the text, but it is not empty of snakes and scorpions. It's a whole thing. Okay. So, and Vayeshev, they sat down, they went to have lunch. So they're having lunch while he's in the pit. And they lift up their eyes, and lo, what do they see? A caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilad, and their camels carrying a bunch of great stuff going down to Egypt, right? This is the trade route. So they're taking stuff down to trade in Egypt, local goods to trade in Egypt. Judah says to his brothers, "What gain is there if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, but let our hand not be upon him. He is our brother, he is our flesh," and his brothers listened to him. We've also talked about why is it Judah who does this, and you'll recall Judah and Tamar and that whole business, and he's learned what it is to lose a son, and he doesn't want to do that to his father. Whole nother thing. Okay. Meanwhile, there are some Midianites, merchants passing by. They hauled Yosef up from the pit and sold Yosef to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Yosef to Egypt. I read a whole article on the editor knows these are two different accounts of the story. It doesn't matter for the editor, right? So remember, we always talk about this when there's two versions together. Either it's because you have to have the northern and southern versions together if you want people to buy the national history book, right? It's both the Civil War and the War of Northern Aggression, the great unpleasantness between the states. So there's either, you have to have both on the page, or there was an article about the reason that there's different versions is because that's not what's important, right? It's not important really how it happened. What's important is that it happens. All right. And Reuven returns to the pit, and lo,
It's empty.
and Yosef Babor. To your point, Hannah, there's no Joseph in the pit. And he tears his clothing, right? Harvey?
Because he's
the same as Ishmael. Are they the sons of Ishmael? The Ishmaelites?
Yeah. Oh, okay. A little bit of what goes around comes around. Ishmaelites is not an accident that these are Ishmaelites who take a son of Yaakov to Egypt as a slave. Not an accident. Okay.
So is this showing that Reuben feels guilty? I mean, because he went along with it. So now
But presumably to save his life. He talked them out of killing him.
right.
In order to return him to his father. So it's very clear, at least by the narrator, that Reuben's intention is to save Yosef. Okay? So he wants to save him. And so then he returns to so then he sees there's no Yaakov in the pit, Yosef in the pit, and he returns to his brothers and he said, Hayeled enenu. The boy is not. Va'ani ana aniva. Beautiful Hebrew. Hayeled enenu va'ani ana aniva. You can't help but miss the alliteration, right? The boy is no more, and where am I to go?
Like,
Meaning
he
what?
can't go back to his father and say, we lost your favorite son.
Exactly.
What to do?
We will never know because that did not happen. Well, I think to save him, he's just trying to get through the day without them killing Yosef. They're murderous at this point. So he's trying to save him, put him in the pit. I'll figure it out later. Right? We can't worry about that right now, but it never happened anyway, right? So they take his tonet, they take his wonderful coat, his tunic, and what do they do with it? They slaughtered a seir. They slaughter a hairy goat. Where have we seen a hairy goat involved in one of our stories recently, people? How did Yaakov steal the birthright? The blessing.
Oh, he took
Because he
Really? He took this hairy goat skin and put them on his arms so he felt like hairy Esav. What goes around comes right back around because they take a hairy goat skin and kill it and they dip the kutonet in the blood, right? And they take it and they bring it to their father. And they say, we found this. Recognize, please, the tunic of your son. Is it or is it not the tunic of your son? All right. So Judah and Tamar, how does Tamar prove her innocence when she's pregnant? And how does she not get burned alive?
She's got a staff.
She's got the staff and the signet,
Right.
the driver's license of Judah. And she says, recognize, please, to whom do these belong? That's who I'm pregnant by.
Guess who?
Is there any significance to the way they phrase the question? Is this your sons as opposed to is this our brothers?
I don't know. But it seems that it's definitely the mirror of Tamar saying, recognize, please, these identifiers. That's who I'm pregnant by. And they come back and go, recognize whose coat this is. Right? And so Yaakov has used against him, right, exactly what he did to his father. That he is deceived by clothing. He's deceived by Tamar. Remember, she's dressed like a prostitute. So he's deceived by her clothing. And he's deceived by the blood of the goat that he used as clothing to deceive his father.
So that also shows how easily we are all deceived.
Correct.
There's some midrashim about why Reuben seemed to be a decent guy, like he was the only one who protected Joseph or tried to protect him from killing?
There's less midrash about why. There's more midrash about because he did that, blah, 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 blah. Like,
About him.
yeah, about Reuven. Yes. Because he did that, la, 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 la. But less about why. I mean, he's the oldest. How do I know that? Reuben was the eldest of the children of Israel, Simeon and Levi. Then, no, we could not get through the entire shiur without a little bit of Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat that I did in 4th grade. Okay. He recognized it. And he says, Ketonet bani. It's the tunic of my son. Chaya ra'ah achlatihu. A beast ate him. Taraf Yosef. Torn to pieces is Yosef. So just take a minute to take in what this is for Yaakov, who thought he had it made now. His whole world is gone. Taraf is torn. And on some level, his reality is destroyed, is torn. The fabric of reality is torn, according to the rabbis, every time we lie. Now, he would have been torn and destroyed if it were true what happened. But they lie. It's not true that something's happened to Yosef. But when they lie to him, it tears his reality just the same. This is the word for treif. Food that's treif is torn, right? Because the meat that we eat has to be shechted. Okay. So and this is also the word meturaf in modern Hebrew means crazy. Meturaf, meaning your mind is torn. So it's a very powerful word. But you see my arms from playing with Luna. Those teeth are serious. They are serious. Imagine Yaakov imagining what it means to be his son to be torn by a beast, right? And that's what they've inflicted on their father.
They put him in Joseph in the pit, which was empty except for water.
And scorpions and snakes, right?
Scorpions. Wasn't he supposed to die from scorpion bites and snake bites and like?
For the brothers, yes. Not for Reuven. Reuven was going to go get him before he died. Yeah, it takes a long time to die of thirst.
3 days.
About 3 days. Well, he figures they can go home and he'll sneak out and go get him. Okay. Let's look at Mijal Bitton. What are we asking?
It says his sons and daughters endeavored to conserve all.
No, they come home.
Oh, they all come home.
They all come home and bring the coat. Yeah, they bring the tunic.
Does he have more than Nina as a daughter? His daughters are.
So yeah, possibly he's got other daughters since
we don't know.
Since Binyamin that we don't know about, right? And he says, "I will go down to my son in mourning, to Sheol," and his father wept. He knows he's going to die in grief. Okay, so Yaakov's life is, in some ways, Rachel's dead, giving birth to Binyamin, that Yaakov didn't even want. She did. She insists on it, and she dies in childbirth, and now her son Yosef is gone, torn apart. I'm even walking my Chihuahua mix of blessed memory, walking Olivia where there are coyotes, right? The thought of, it's torturous to think. You don't just think, what if a coyote got her? You think about what her experience would be dying in the teeth of a coyote, right? I can't imagine what's happening for Yaakov. All right, we're going to look at Mijal Bitton because we're not going to do the part of the story that we see, but you're getting a taste of how Torah tells the story. You can look her up. You can go to Hartman and look her up and hear her lectures. She's just brilliant. She's one of those people I could listen to read the phone book, just for those of us who remember what a phone book is. Right. I say that around some people and they're like, what? What are you talking about? The book for the phone? What don't you know how to use the phone? So you mean the user's manual? All right. And remember the theme of my Torah teaching this year. Remember, right? The theme of my Torah teaching is I'm picking commentaries and texts and whatever about how to bring these texts forward to the time that we're living in. Because I'm struggling. So
About the effect of the lie on the reality of life. Look at what we have going on now. I mean, it couldn't be more apropos.
I didn't write it. It's right there. It's right there. I didn't make it up. Okay. Being a Jew means belonging to a family. Then she goes on to talk about wearing masks and some relatives who didn't wear masks. They were Orthodox. She comes from an Orthodox family. So she says, the moment amused me. I pictured quiet gossip about my family's ideological diversity in a sea of seemingly aligned relationships. But it also highlighted how deeply politics has infiltrated American life, making family differences feel almost taboo. My answer was simple. Before focusing on tactics, it's essential to first prioritize a commitment to family as North Star. Real life, of course, is far more complicated, and I don't mean to downplay the challenges, but it's worth reflecting on this question. Do we prioritize family over ideology? This tension is reflected in this week's Torah portion, Vayeshev. Jacob has lived as a refugee, been deceived by his father-in-law, wrestled with an ish, and endured the trauma of his daughter's rape. With no more external adversaries, Jacob hopes to find, Nick, peace at last. But as so often happens, Jacob fails to see that the greatest threats aren't external. They come from within. His blatant favoritism toward Yosef alienates his other sons. Joseph, in turn, fuels the tension by boasting about grandiose dreams of ruling over his brothers. Consumed by hatred, the brothers betray both Yosef and their father. They first plot to kill Yosef, then compromise by throwing him into a pit, ultimately selling him into slavery. Like many, I've often read this story empathizing with Joseph's pain. But viewing the Bible only through the lens of the good characters blinds us to the deeply human impulses we all share. This year, I stepped into the brothers' shoes. Their actions, while extreme, began to make sense. They were never taught to see family as sacred to the covenant. Consider their inheritance. Their great-grandfather Abraham disowned his son Ishmael. Their grandmother Rivka encouraged one son to deceitfully take his brother's blessing. Their father Yaakov lived in fear of his twin. For them, the Jewish covenant wasn't rooted in family. It was about committing to God's mission. Anyone unwilling to accept the covenant was cast out. Perhaps this is why they felt justified in disposing of a brother whose dreams implied he wanted people to bow to him instead of God. What they didn't know, but we do, is that they were the first Jewish siblings called to embody the most advanced form of Jewish covenant, one that places family as a first principle. In this covenant, every brother has a place. The awkward Reuven, weighed down by the responsibilities of the firstborn, the hot-tempered Shimon, and even the immature, self-important Yosef. This idea that family lies at the heart of our mission, that to be a Jew is to belong to a family and see each member as integral to our existence, becomes the spiritual DNA of the Jewish people. And by the way, I love that she uses the word spiritual DNA, right? For those of us who don't have a drop of Jewish DNA, I love that she totally understands that, right? That we are, of course, genetically, spiritually, descendants of Abraham and Sarah. Yaakov's sons took time to learn this, yet paradoxically it was Yosef, the one who suffered the most at their hands, who mastered it. In a few weeks, we will read how, despite their betrayal, Joseph chose reconciliation, embodying a vision of Judaism that endures. He forgave his brothers, prioritized fraternal bonds, and proved himself not only as Yosef, the righteous, loyal to the God of Yaakov, but also as Yosef, the brother, unwavering in his commitment to family. Yosef's example goes even further. He shows us how to prioritize family not out of crisis, but from commitment. In times of suffering, the covenant of family instinctively rises to the forefront. We have felt this firsthand. Since October 7th, as our people in Israel endure unceasing war and anti-Semitism surges worldwide, our response has been immediate: to draw close and reconnect with ancient bonds. But holding on to fractious family is far harder when times are good. Harder, but not impossible. Joseph shows us it can be done. As Viceroy of Egypt, he could have turned away, leaving his past and his brothers as distant memories buried beneath his success. Yet Yosef chose to help his brothers, not out of necessity or crisis, but from an unshakable commitment to the covenant of family, right? Yosef is wealthy and powerful. He's not in crisis. This was not merely a powerful man showing mercy, but a brother choosing love over estrangement, unity over division. Joseph's example is urgently needed today. In the West, cultural narratives have reframed Judaism primarily as a religion, sidelining its essence as a people, an extended family. As early as the 1970s, political scientist Charles Liebman observed American Jews shifting from an ethnic and familial identity toward a religious one. Y'all, this is super important. This is really important, because what is Reconstructionism based on, founded on? The only constant in Jewish history is Jewish peoplehood. Not God, not prayer, not texts. We translate and over-translate and mistranslate and misread on purpose over and over and over in a myriad of different ways. The only constant is the Jewish people. Religious practice has changed. Theology has changed. Prayers have changed and evolved. We as a family are the only constant. This is shifting. There are some who are saying this is the beginning. Oh, I'm going to cry. There are some who are saying this is the beginning of the end for us. That as we shift away from understanding that we belong to each other first and foremost as a people, our religion is getting so thin that we are on the way out. Our Judaism is so thin that we are on the way out. If we are defined as a religion, it's over. The project is over. There are those of us who refuse to give in to that being inevitable. There's lots being written about this right now, and it's very distressing to read, because it's not wrong but there is a reality of a danger that our Judaism is so thin that if it's only about religion, we don't stand a chance. But if it's about peoplehood, we've survived 3,000 years of differences and fighting and sects and clashing of belief, clashing of practice, excommunicating each other from our communities. But we've survived 3,000 years because we understand ourselves to be a people that belong to each other. What Doniel Hartman calls being encumbered by each other. We choose to be encumbered by each other. We don't give up because we disagree. And that is what Mijal Bitton is saying, I believe here, is that shift to seeing ourselves as a religion and identifying as Jews means identifying as part of the Jewish religious experience is terribly dangerous.
I've had this argument or discussion with some of my non-Jewish friends who consider being Jewish only as a religion. And I try to say, no, we're a people. And it's been quite a difficult task to get them to go there.
So the only answer I give to that helps seem to cut through all that for people is talking about my experience living in northern Minnesota. Among the minorities who were not from another country, they were not the minorities in Duluth were Native Americans, right, who don't want to be called Native Americans, by the way, at least in northern Minnesota, they want to be called Indians. So I will use that term because that is what they instructed me is what they want to be called. So the Indians there said they identify as a part of a people, part of a tribe, and that tribe has a religious set of practices, right? And beliefs or, whatever, and rituals that they do. No one asks someone, how Anishinaabe are you? And the answer is somehow defined by how often they go to a sweat, right? How Anishinaabe are you? If a white person is asking that, what are they asking? How Anishinaabe are you? What are we asking as white people usually?
How observant.
Not how observant.
How there's like genetic, like
How much of your blood is Anishinaabe?
That's right.
It's genetic.
Yeah.
We're not asking how often do you smoke a peace pipe when we ask how Ojibwe are you, right? That seems to cut through. People I said we are much closer to Native Americans, to Indians than we are to Christians. Christians are all peoples because a belief makes them Christian. For us, we are much more like the Ojibwe, the Anishinaabe, and all other Native peoples in that we are first a people, and you can be adopted by this tribe. You don't have to be genetically, the Ojibwe adopt people and give them their tribal name, which is why I call our Hebrew names a tribal name, right? So you're given a tribal name when you're adopted into that tribe. And once you're adopted into that tribe, you are considered as if you were born into the Ojibwe people. So you are now fully Ojibwe. And you have a religious expression of the Ojibwe people, but it is not how you are defined. You're defined by what you wear, by the culture, by the language, by the music, by how you understand the universe, how you understand time, how you understand a relationship to nature, right? Those are what make you Ojibwe. No one understands Ojibwe as a religion. Yes, there's Ojibwe religion, but right. And so that for me is the only way to answer people who just can't seem to get it.
I'm working on it.
Yeah. And so that's what I use.
On the other side of the same, when my husband David died, my father came out. My father's very Christian. And he stood and he watched and he observed everything going on. And then he said at the end, at last, I understand why my daughter became Jew. Mm-hmm. And I said, what, Dad? He said, it's the community. Mm-hmm. It's your community. Mm-hmm. You're all here together. And I thought, he got it.
Someone recently sat in my office, I'm looking right at you, and said to me, Rabbi, I came and I saw how all of you had each other's backs. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Did you not say that to me? Yes, you did. Nod. I'm looking right at you. All right.
Just during the 40s and 50s, my mother, every headline that came through, my mother said, is it good or bad for the Jews?
Oh, yeah.
So many questions.
That's how my father read the newspaper. It's how he watched the news at night. Is this good or bad for the Jews? Right. So this is not only what has helped us survive. This is the point.
Right.
Like for some of us, this is the point. Right? Is because we believe this is not a solo flight.
It's a right.
It's it's us.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all over this. What is it that unites us, if not this book? And that something out of this book we have to interact with, or what is it we're handing on? I mean, I'm thinking of, the children who marry non-Jews, and then what are they raising? What is the Jewishness in it, if not connected to the values in this book, which you need to connect with? There has to be something of the religion in there, because those are the values. I don't understand how you can say it's not part of having been raised as an atheist by very Jewish parents. I don't know how that survives it, past a generation or so if somebody doesn't. Well,
lots of folks like your parents have survived and passed on a Jewish identity without connecting to these texts. Now, I'm not sitting in this chair going to argue that that's a good idea. Right? I believe we have to tell our story. It's what defines us.
I mean, they didn't know it.
Right.
What good Jews they were. But they would probably argue with that. But how does that happen? How does that get passed on without knowing at least what it came from? Because
it's about passing on a thick Jewish identity. Mm-hmm. And there's lots of ways to do that. I think my thickest Jewish identity was formed in summer camp. Jewish summer camp. Jewish summer camp. I went to Jewish day school. It was part of it was what I knew, but a lot of it was just I had a very thick Jewish identity. And that's what we have to figure out how to nurture and pass on for our kids. All right. Our deepened commitment to one another, to our brothers and sisters in Israel, and to Jews around the world could remain a fleeting response to crisis rather than a lasting dedication to our covenantal identity as a people. Without intentional rededication, what holiday are we coming up on, y'all? Oh, Hanukkah, the festival of life and dedication. Without a rededication, it's a tough group. Without intentional rededication, this renewed closeness may fade as the crises that ignited it subside. Joseph reminds us that no matter how estranged we may feel, we can always choose to relearn what our covenant calls us to do. We are a family, not just in moments of crisis, but through deliberate everyday choices to nurture and sustain our bonds, even when no external force compels us. We as American Jews can choose to live as the family our covenant calls us to be.
You've been listening to Rabbi Amy Bernstein's Friday morning Torah study from Kehillat Israel in Pacific Palisades, California. For more information, go to our website, www.ourki.org.